Drum mode provides a dedicated interface for working with drum racks or impulse. The lower 16 pads in the center here will be configured to either play the 16 visible pads in a drum rack or the 8 slots in impulse, depending on what the track contains. These pads can also perform some other functions. When quantize is held down, pressing a pad will quantize the notes associated with the pad. When delete is held down, pressing a pad will delete the notes associated with the pad. If the clip is playing, instead of deleting, this will erase the portion of notes that the playhead is currently passing over. When configured to play a drum rack, these pads offer some additional functions. First of all, octave up and down will move the drum rack selector up or down by 4 rows. If shift is pressed, these will move the drum rack selector up or down by 1 row. When mute is held down, the pads can be used for muting drum rack pads. Shift plus mute will unmute all drum rack pads. When solo is held down, the pads can be used for soloing drum rack pads. Shift plus solo will unsolo all drum rack pads. And finally, when select is held down, the pads can be used for selecting drum rack pads. The amber pads in the corner here are last pads. These will trigger whichever pad was played last. This makes it so you have at least 2 pads to play, which is useful for playing fast passages and such. The last pads are also independently lockable. When locked, the last pad will continue playing the pad that it's assigned to, even if you press other pads. For example, I can lock this last pad to this shaker by pressing shift plus the last pad, and this will make it so I always have access to that shaker even if I move to other areas of the drum rack. The upper 16 pads in the center are 16 levels pads. These will all trigger whichever pad was triggered last, each at a different level. By default, they control velocity level. In the case of drum racks, these pads can control velocity and/or pitch. When controlling pitch, each pad is assigned to a different pitch, so you can play a pad chromatically. The blue pads in the upper corner here are cycle pads. Each of these can record and play back a sequence of up to 8 steps. To record a sequence, you press shift plus one of these pads to activate recording, and then play the steps that you want to record. Once you've recorded a sequence, you can play it back with the cycle pad, and then embellish upon it with the other pads. By default, when note repeat is on, applying pressure to a pad will control the velocity of the repeated notes. As we saw in the previous video, the repeat velocity option allows us to turn this functionality off. In this mode, we have some additional repeat options. These allow the pressure applied to a pad to control parameters. By default, these will affect pitch. This first option makes it so pad pressure will affect the entire range of the parameter. The next 2 options offer a more limited range of control. The second option here scales the range between the minimum value of the parameter and the current value of the parameter. The third option here scales the range from the current value of the parameter to the maximum value of the parameter. As we just saw, you can use this to control pitch, or filter frequency, filter resonance, decay, or panning. To give you another example, let's try filter frequency. In your preferences file, you can customize the LED colors that are used in this mode. For drum racks, you can also create associations between LED colors and pad names. For example, this first entry here defines that any pad with the word kick in its name will be purple. The second entry here defines that any pad with either snare or clap in their name will be white. You can create as many of these associations as you want, and these will apply to any drum rack that's loaded. To give you an example of what this looks like, as you can see here, all my kicks are purple, all my snares and claps are white, my hi-hats and shakers are amber, this cymbal and any other names that I haven't defined will be yellow, and my toms are red.